The golden palace of the Zilari Empire stood tall under the twin suns of planet Rilun. It sparkled like a giant jewel in the sky. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. The royal court was full of worried faces. Servants walked on tiptoe. Advisors whispered in corners. Even the palace guards, known for their strong voices, stood still and silent. At the center of it all sat Emperor Vol, ruler of the Zilari people. He wore a heavy crown with blue crystals that glowed softly. But he did not look proud or happy. He looked troubled. He sat on his throne, tapping his long fingers on the armrest, eyes staring at the ceiling. Above the throne, a painting showed 4 giant dragons flying through the sky, their wings wide and bright. The dragons were not just art, they were real. Well, sort of real. They were not made of flesh and bone. They were sky dragons, huge biomechanical machines built thousands of years ago by a lost alien race. They looked like dragons and flew like dragons, but inside, they were full of circuits, engines, and strange glowing stones. They were gifts from the past, passed down from emperor to emperor. The dragons had once obeyed every command. They flew during royal events. They guarded the palace. They danced in the skies during festivals. People came from across the galaxy just to see them. But now, they were broken. Or worse, wild. They refused to follow any order. They ignored the control towers. They roared in the skies, flew without warning, and sometimes even scared away royal ships. They landed where they wanted, scratched palace walls with their sharp claws, and blasted hot air that melted garden fountains. "Your Majesty," said one advisor, bowing low. "The dragons are a danger. The people are afraid." "We have tried everything," said another. "New codes. Repairs. Even the high engineers of Takra Prime failed. The dragons do not listen." Emperor Vol stood up and walked to the window. He looked outside. There they were. 4 massive dragons, sitting on the tall towers of the palace, their metal wings folded. One was red, another silver, the third deep blue, and the fourth green with golden eyes. They looked like statues. But the emperor knew they were waiting. Watching. And no one dared go near them. The emperor sighed. "They were once loyal guardians," he said softly. "Now they act like beasts." The court fell silent. Then a young servant, who had been standing quietly in the back, spoke. "Your Majesty," he said nervously, "there is one more option." Everyone turned to look at him. The servant swallowed hard. "Speak," said Vol. "There is a human mechanic on Colony 9. His name is Tomu. He fixes old machines no one else can. They say he once repaired a broken thinking ship using only a spoon and tape." The advisors laughed. "A human? A colony mechanic? This is the royal palace, not a garbage port." But Vol raised his hand. The room went quiet. "Call him," said the emperor. 3 days later, a small ship landed on the far edge of the palace landing pads. It was not shiny or grand. It had no royal flags or guards. But it made a soft, clean landing, without sparks or smoke. The door opened with a gentle hiss. A man stepped out. He was not tall or strong-looking. He wore simple clothes with oil stains. A small toolkit hung on his side. His boots were dusty. His face was calm, and his eyes curious. He looked up at the 4 dragons resting on the towers. Then he looked around at the palace. "Nice place," he said. The guards frowned. The advisors whispered. "Is this really the human?" "Yes," said the emperor, stepping forward. "You are Tomu." "I am," the man said. "You have dragons with a mood problem." "They are wild," said Vol. "No one can control them." Tomu scratched his chin. "Machines that don't listen usually don't understand. Or they're angry. Or tired. The emperor raised an eyebrow. You think they are tired? Tomu smiled. Even machines need care. Let me take a look. A shocked silence filled the court. You wish to go near them? Asked the head advisor. Of course, Tomu said. Can't fix what you don't meet. And with that, the human mechanic, alone and calm, walked toward the courtyard toward the four massive dragons. Everyone watched. Would he return in one piece? Or do what no one else could? The emperor held his breath. The palace courtyard was wide and empty except for the four dragons. They stood tall on their landing pads, their metal scales shining under the twin suns. The air smelled of hot oil and ozone. Sparks flew from one dragon's wingtip, and a low humming sound filled the space. Emperor Vol and his advisors watched from the palace steps. The palace guards stood ready but tense. No one wanted to get too close to the dragons. After all, they were giant machines with power beyond anything on Rilun. But Tomu, the human mechanic, walked calmly across the courtyard. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth stone floor. He carried only a small toolbox and wore a confident smile. As Tomu got closer, the dragons moved their heads slowly. Their glowing eyes followed him. One let out a low growl-like noise, but it was more mechanical than wild. The largest dragon, the red one, lifted its wings slightly, casting a big shadow. Tomu stopped and looked up at it. Hello there, he said softly, almost like he was talking to a pet. The dragon blinked. Its glowing eyes dimmed for a moment. Tomu pulled a small sandwich from his pocket and sat down on the ground. He unwrapped it and took a bite. The red dragon tilted its head, watching him. The courtiers gasped. Is he really eating that close? Whispered an advisor. Tomu smiled with his mouth full. You don't scare something by shouting. You make it curious. He held out a small piece of the sandwich toward the dragon. The dragon slowly lowered its head, sniffed, then gently took the food from Tomu's hand. The crowd could hardly believe their eyes. The dragon nudged Tomu's hand with its snout. Then it lowered its head to the ground, a clear sign of calm. Emperor Vol's eyes widened. He is calming the dragon. Tomu nodded and looked at the other dragons. Now the others. They just want to know you're not a threat. He stood and slowly walked toward the silver dragon. It hissed and snapped its jaws, but Tomu raised his hand in a calm gesture. Easy, he said softly. Just a fix, not a fight. The silver dragon took a few steps back, but Tomu didn't run. He sat down again, this time whistling a soft tune. The dragon tilted its head and watched. Slowly, it lowered its wings and sat down next to Tomu. The other two dragons watched quietly. Tomu took out a small scanner from his toolbox. He clicked a few buttons, then pointed it toward the red dragon. The device beeped, showing lines of data on a small screen. See? Tomu said. They're tired. Their systems are overloaded and confused. They don't know who to listen to. The head advisor frowned. How can a machine be tired? Tomu chuckled. Machines run on code and power, but sometimes their brain circuits get tangled. Or their memories get mixed up. They need a reset, like a good night's sleep for humans. Emperor Vol was silent for a moment. Then he said, can you fix them? Tomu smiled. I can try. But I'll need to get inside and see their parts up close. That is dangerous, shouted a guard. Tomu looked up calmly. The real danger is ignoring a problem. The emperor nodded. Very well. You may proceed. Tomu reached out to touch the dragon's smooth neck. The red dragon stayed still, almost as if it trusted him. He climbed a small ladder attached to the dragon's side and opened a panel. Inside was a maze of glowing wires, spinning gears, and flickering lights. Tomu's eyes lit up. This is old, but well built. Just some rust and tangled circuits. He pulled out a small brush and cleaned dust away. Then he carefully untangled some wires. Suddenly, a soft alarm beeped inside the dragon. Tomu froze for a moment, then smiled. See? The system is alive. He took out a small device and connected it to the dragon's brain unit. The machine hummed softly. Outside, the other dragons watched closely. The red dragon lowered its head, almost resting it near Tomu's feet. Tomu spoke quietly, "Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you." After an hour of work, Tomu climbed down. The dragon blinked its glowing eyes, now calm and steady. The crowd started to relax. Emperor Vol stepped forward. "Is it fixed?" Tomu shook his head. "Partly. They need time. But I have an idea how to get the rest done." The other dragons slowly approached. One green dragon gently nudged Tomu's side, as if saying hello. Tomu laughed. "Looks like we're friends already." That night, Tomu stayed in the palace workshop. He studied old blueprints of the dragons and worked late into the evening. He found old notes from previous engineers. Many said the dragons were almost impossible to control. But Tomu believed differently. "These dragons aren't just machines," he said to himself. "They are like creatures. They need respect and care." The next morning, Tomu was ready for the next step. Emperor Vol came to the workshop. "Have you found a way?" Tomu smiled. "Yes. Tomorrow, I'll try to speak their language." The emperor raised an eyebrow. "Language?" Tomu nodded. "Yes. Not words, but signals and trust. If we can speak with the dragons, they will listen." The emperor smiled for the first time in days. The dragons outside stirred, as if ready for a new day. And so, the human mechanic prepared to do what no one else could, tame the wild sky dragons by understanding them. The next morning, the sun rose over the Zilari palace with a gentle golden light. The four dragons stood silently on their towers, their metal wings folding slowly like giant petals. The palace was quiet, but the air felt electric as if something important was about to happen. Tomu, the human mechanic, stood in the courtyard. He carried a small bag filled with tools and a simple device he had built overnight. The device looked like a small box with blinking lights and buttons, designed to send signals the dragons could understand. Emperor Vol watched from his window, his face a mix of hope and worry. The royal advisors stood behind him, whispering about whether this plan would work or end in disaster. Tomu took a deep breath and stepped forward. The biggest challenge was not fixing parts or wires. It was to get close enough to the dragons to try his new idea. For days, no one had dared approach the wild machines. But Tomu walked slowly, confidently, toward the largest dragon, the red one they called Fira. Fira's glowing eyes followed him. The dragon growled softly, a low, buzzing sound that shook the ground. The air was hot, and the dragon's metal scales gleamed like fire. Tomu stopped a few meters away and sat down calmly on the ground. He pulled out the small device and pressed a button. A soft series of lights blinked and a quiet melody played. Fira tilted its head, listening. Tomu smiled and spoke gently, "I'm Tomu. I'm your friend." The dragon blinked its eyes and slowly lowered its massive head closer to Tomu. The heat from its metal body warmed the air. Tomu reached out his hand carefully and touched the dragon's nose. The surface was cool where the metal was thin, and the dragon did not pull away. He took out a small piece of bread from his bag and held it out. Fira sniffed, then gently took the bread with its mouth. It was the first time in weeks anyone had fed the dragon by hand. The other dragons watched silently. Encouraged, Tomu pressed another button on his device. The melody changed to a softer tune. Suddenly, a small panel on Fira's neck opened. Inside, lights flickered, and mechanical sounds hummed. Tomu reached up and carefully touched the panel. Let's see what's inside. He climbed a small ladder attached to the dragon's side and opened the access panel. Inside, wires glowed faintly, and gears turned slowly. Tomu's eyes studied the inner parts. You're tired, old friend. But I'll help you feel better. He pulled out a tiny brush and cleaned dust away. Then he untangled some wires that had crossed. Outside, the crowd held their breath. Emperor Vol leaned forward, eyes wide. After a few minutes, Toma climbed down. Fira's eyes glowed a brighter red and it made a gentle humming sound. Tomu smiled. Better. Next, Tomu approached the silver dragon, Siri. She was smaller but faster. As he neared, she snapped her jaws, a warning to stay back. But Tomu was patient. He sat down again and used his device to play a calm melody. Siri blinked, her eyes flickering. Slowly, she lowered her wings and sat beside him. Tomu reached out and gently touched her side. The dragon did not move away. He opened her panel and carefully checked inside. He found tangled wires and a cracked power cell. Tomu removed the damaged part and replaced it with a spare from his bag. Siri hummed softly. The crowd whispered in amazement. For the green dragon, Goro, Tomu had to use a different approach. Goro was the most nervous of all. When Tomu got close, Goro flared his wings and made loud hissing noises. But Tomu didn't run. Instead, he took out a small mirror and showed it to Goro. The dragon saw its own reflection and stopped for a moment, curious. Tomu smiled and said, "Hello, Goro. You're not alone." Slowly, Goro lowered his wings and let Tomu open his panel. Inside, Tomu found old programming chips that were cracked. He carefully removed them and inserted new ones. Goro gave a soft rumble of approval. Finally, the blue dragon, Luna, was quiet but strong. She sat still on her tower, watching everything. Toma climbed slowly to her side. Luna did not growl or snap. She just watched. Toma pulled out his device and played a soft tune. Luna's eyes blinked slowly. Tomu opened her panel and found a stuck hydraulic pump. He worked carefully, cleaning and oiling the parts. Luna's wings moved gently, as if stretching after a long rest. After hours of work, Tomu stepped back. The four dragons now looked calm. Their glowing eyes were steady. Their breathing sounds were soft and even. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers. Emperor Vol came down to the courtyard, his eyes shining. "You did it, Tomu. They trust you." Tomu smiled. "They are not wild. They just needed someone to listen." One of the dragons, Fira, lowered her head so the emperor could touch her. He hesitated, then gently placed his hand on her nose. The dragon hummed softly. For the first time in many weeks, the palace felt peaceful. That night, the dragons rested quietly on their towers. Tomu stayed in the workshop, planning his next steps. He understood that fixing wires was only the beginning. The dragons had feelings, memories, and needs. They were not just machines. They were guardians. And Tomu was ready to help them fly again. The morning sun painted the palace courtyard in soft gold as Tomu prepared for his next task. The dragons stood quietly on their towers, calm and watchful. Today, Tomu was not just going to fix them from outside, he needed to go inside one of the dragons and see what was truly wrong. Emperor Vol and the royal advisors watched from a distance. Everyone hoped this would be the key to saving the dragons. Tomu chose Fira, the largest red dragon, to start with. He carried his toolbox and a small ladder toward the dragon's side. The great machine did not move or growl. Instead, it lowered its neck, as if inviting Tomu in. Tomu smiled and began climbing the ladder carefully. The access panel was heavy but opened smoothly with a hiss. Inside, it was dark but filled with strange lights and humming machines. Gears turned slowly, wires glowed softly, and little screens flashed messages in an alien language. Tomu pulled out a small flashlight and began to explore. He was amazed by how complex the dragons inside was. It looked like a city made of metal and light. He saw spinning wheels that worked like muscles, power cores glowing like small suns, and computers with circuits that moved faster than anything Tomu had seen before. But there was a problem. Some wires were broken or burned. Others were tangled or crossed, making the signals get lost. Parts were covered in dust, and some memory chips were damaged. Tomu took a deep breath. "This dragon is hurt," he said quietly. "Not in the way you think. It needs a doctor, not a warrior." He set to work. First, he carefully cleaned the dusty parts with a soft brush. Then he untangled the crossed wires, making sure signals could flow properly. Next, he found the damaged memory chips. These chips stored the dragon's memories and commands. If they were broken, the dragon would forget who it was or who to listen to. Tomu opened his toolbox and pulled out new chips he had brought. He swapped the broken ones carefully, making sure they fit perfectly. While working, Tomu noticed a small screen flashing error messages. He tapped on the buttons next to it and began to rewrite the dragon's commands slowly. He typed simple instructions: "Trust Tomu, fly calmly, protect the palace." After hours inside the dragon, Tomu felt tired but happy. He climbed down the ladder and closed the panel. Outside, Fira blinked her glowing eyes and let out a soft hum, almost like a purr. Emperor Vol stepped forward. "Is it fixed?" Tomu nodded. "Better, but not done. These dragons need time and care. Their memories are confused. We have to help them remember who they are." The advisors murmured among themselves. Some still doubted. But Tomu was ready to help the other dragons the same way. Next, Tomu approached Siri, the silver dragon. He opened her panel and found something different. Siri's power core was weak. It blinked slowly, losing energy. Without power, the dragon could not fly or obey commands. Tomu took out a small device called a power stabilizer. He attached it carefully to the core. The device hummed and shone bright light. Siri's eyes glowed stronger, and she lifted her head proudly. "Good as new," said Tomu with a grin. Goro, the green dragon, was next. Inside, Tomu found stuck gears and rusted joints. He oiled and cleaned every moving part. Slowly, Goro's wings moved freely again. The dragon made a low rumble, a happy sound. Finally, Luna, the blue dragon, had a stuck hydraulic pump. It made her wings heavy and slow. Tomu worked patiently, repairing the pump and making sure oil flowed smoothly. When Luna moved her wings again, they stretched wide like a bird waking up. At the end of the day, Tomu sat quietly in the courtyard. The dragons stood tall, their eyes glowing steady and calm. They looked strong, ready to fly again. Emperor Vol approached him. "You have done something no one else could." Tomu smiled. "I only listened and helped. They are not machines to be controlled. They are living guardians with stories and memories." The emperor nodded. "Then we must help them remember their stories." That night, Tomu wrote notes in his workshop. He drew pictures of wires and circuits. He wrote words about trust and patience. He knew fixing machines was only the start. The dragons needed to feel safe, cared for, and understood. And most of all, they needed someone who believed in them. The days passed slowly but surely. Tomu worked tirelessly, visiting each dragon every morning and evening. He cleaned, repaired, and tested their systems. But he knew there was something deeper to fix, something no tool or chip could repair. The dragons had lost their connection to the empire and to each other. They needed to remember who they were, not just machines, but guardians with hearts and minds. One morning, Tomu sat under the shade of a large tree near the palace courtyard. He watched the dragons resting on their towers, their metal bodies gleaming in the sunlight. Suddenly, an idea came to him. If I want to speak to them, Tomu said quietly, I must learn their language. He stood up and walked to his workshop. He pulled out his notebook filled with sketches, diagrams, and notes he had made while working on the dragons. The dragons communicated in many ways. They had lights that blinked, sounds that hummed, and movements that sent signals. It was a language built from their parts and circuits. Tomu decided to build a device to send and receive these signals, a translator between humans and dragons. For days, he worked on the device, connecting wires, programming code, and testing signals. Sometimes the device beeped happily. Other times it only made strange noises. But Tomu was patient. Finally, the device was ready. Tomu called Emperor Vol to the courtyard. I think I can talk to the dragons now, Tomu said with a hopeful smile. The Emperor nodded, his eyes shining with trust. Do it, Tomu. Tomu climbed up the ladder to Fira, the red dragon. He placed the device near her neck panel and turned it on. The device began to blink lights and play a soft melody. Fira's eyes blinked in response. Then, the device sent a series of signals, blinking lights and hums in a pattern Tomu hoped the dragon would understand. To everyone's surprise, Fira's wings moved slowly, and she let out a soft roar, a mechanical sound mixed with a feeling of joy. The device captured the sound and translated it into a series of lights and numbers. Tomu smiled. She's talking back. Encouraged, Tomu tried the same with Siri, the silver dragon. He placed the device on her neck, and the signals began. Siri's eyes glowed bright blue. She hummed a melody, and the device translated it to words: safe, friend, protect. The crowd gasped. The dragons were sending messages. Goro, the green dragon, and Luna, the blue dragon, also responded. Their messages were simple but clear: trust, calm, together. Tomu looked at Emperor Vol. They want to work with us. They want to protect the empire again. The emperor smiled proudly. Then we must give them that chance. Over the next few days, Tomu used the device to teach the dragons commands and listen to their responses. He spoke words like fly, guard, and return, and the dragons responded with understanding. The palace staff watched in wonder as the dragons followed simple commands for the first time in months. But Tomu knew this was only the beginning. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in orange and purple, Tomu sat with the dragons. He looked up at Fira and said softly, "Tell me your story." The device blinked as it listened. A soft hum came from Fira, and the device translated it into words: long ago, we were built to protect. We flew over cities and stars. We kept peace. But time passed. Our memories faded. We forgot who we serve. Tomu nodded. I will help you remember. The dragons gathered closer, their eyes glowing warmly. Together, they were more than machines, they were living legends. That night, Emperor Vol held a grand ceremony. The palace was filled with music, light, and joy. The 4 dragons flew above the palace, their wings casting great shadows over the crowd. They moved gracefully, no longer wild but free and proud. The people cheered for their guardians returned. And in the crowd, Tomu smiled, knowing his work was far from over but that the future was bright. The palace courtyard was alive with excitement. The dragons soared above, their metal wings cutting through the sky with grace. The people of Rilun watched with joy and wonder. After months of silence and fear, their guardians had returned. Tomu stood among the crowd, smiling quietly. The connection he had built with the dragons was stronger than ever. They trusted him, and he trusted them. But deep in the shadows, far from the palace, a new danger was rising. A fleet of strange ships appeared on the horizon. Dark and silent, they moved toward Rilun like a shadow creeping over the land. The ships were unlike anything anyone had seen before, sleek, fast, and armed with weapons that glowed ominously. The royal advisors spotted the ships from the palace towers. Panic spread quickly. "Enemy ships," shouted one guard. "They are coming to attack." Emperor Vol gathered his council. "Prepare the defenses," he ordered. "Call the dragons to protect the city." Tomu's heart beat faster. This was the moment he had been preparing for. The dragons had to prove their strength and loyalty. He ran to the courtyard where the dragons rested. "Fira, Ciri, Goro, Luna," he called. "The city needs you." The dragons lifted their heads, their eyes shining bright. They were ready. Toma climbed onto Fira's back. "Hold on," he said. "We're going to stop this threat." With powerful wing beats, Fira rose into the sky, followed by the other dragons. Toma could feel the machine's strength beneath him, the steady hum of their power. Above the city, the fleet of ships grew larger. They spread out like a dark cloud, moving quickly toward the palace. The dragons flew in formation, circling the fleet. Toma used his device to send signals of warning. The dragons sent back messages of readiness. Suddenly, one of the enemy ships fired a bright beam of energy. The light struck the ground, making a deep crater. Toma shouted, "Attack!" Fira and the other dragons charged forward. Their metal claws and wings struck the ships with incredible force. The dragons breathed blasts of flame and sparks, powered by their engines. The enemy ships tried to dodge but were no match for the dragons' speed and strength. One ship fired a missile. Luna moved quickly, catching it mid-air with her claws and throwing it into the ocean. Ciri used her sharp tail to slice through another ship's wing. Goro flapped his wings hard, creating strong gusts of wind that pushed enemy ships off course. The battle was fierce. The sky was filled with light and sound. Tomu held tight, guiding the dragons with calm commands. Despite their strength, the enemy ships were many. Tomu knew they needed a plan. "Dragons, listen," he shouted into his device. "Form a circle. Protect the city. We need to break their formation." The dragons obeyed, flying in a tight ring around the palace. The enemy fleet hesitated, surprised by the dragons' coordination. Using the moment, Tomu sent a powerful signal through his device, activating a hidden defense system beneath the palace. Energy shields rose around the city, glowing with blue light. The enemy ships fired again, but their attacks bounced off the shields harmlessly. Tomu smiled. "We're safe for now." The dragons roared, pushing the enemy back. Slowly, the fleet began to retreat. Emperor Vol watched from the palace steps, relief and pride in his eyes. After the ships disappeared over the horizon, the dragons landed back in the courtyard, tired but victorious. The people cheered louder than ever. Toma climbed down from Fira and looked at the dragons. "You saved the city," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." Fira nudged him gently, as if saying, "We are stronger together." That night, the palace was alive with celebration. Music and laughter filled the halls. But Tomu stayed in his workshop, thinking. The attack was just the beginning. More enemies could come. The dragons needed to be stronger and smarter. He looked at his notes and the device. "We have work to do," he whispered. The days after the battle were filled with hard work. The people of Rilun repaired their city, but the dragons and Tomu knew this peace might not last forever. Tomu spent long hours in his workshop, designing new tools and devices to help the dragons. He wanted them to be faster, stronger, and smarter. More than that, he wanted to deepen the bond between humans and dragons so they could face any challenge together. One morning, Tomu stood at the edge of the palace courtyard, watching the four dragons rest in the sunlight. Fira stretched her massive wings, her red scales shining brightly. Ciri sharpened her silver claws, ready for action. Goro blinked his green eyes slowly, calm and steady. Luna folded her blue wings, quiet but strong. Tomu walked toward them with a new device in his hands. This will help you learn faster and talk with us more clearly, he explained. The dragons seemed curious. Tomu placed the device near Fira's neck panel and activated it. Soft lights blinked, and a gentle melody played. Suddenly, Fira's eyes glowed brighter. She made a sound that Tomu's device translated, "Thank you." The other dragons looked at Tomu with trust and warmth. Emperor Vol joined Tomu in the courtyard. "You have done more than fix machines," he said. "You have brought hope back to our people." Tomu smiled. "It is not just me. It is all of us working together, humans and dragons." The emperor nodded. "Then we must prepare for the future." In the following weeks, Tomu trained the dragons to fly in new formations and to understand more complex commands. He taught them to listen carefully, not just to his voice but to the signals from the city and the people. The dragons grew smarter and more confident. The city's defenses grew stronger too, with new energy shields and communication systems built by Tomu and the palace engineers. The people of Rilun looked up at the dragons with pride. No longer were the machines feared. They were friends, protectors, and symbols of hope. One afternoon, as Tomu was working in his workshop, a young girl named Myra came to visit. "I want to help the dragons too," she said eagerly. Tomu smiled. "That's wonderful, Myra. The more people who care, the stronger we all become." He showed her how to use simple tools and the dragon translator device. Myra learned quickly. Soon, she was helping Tomu clean and repair the dragons. Together, they became a team. But life was not just about work. The dragons loved to fly freely above the city, feeling the wind and sun. One evening, Tomu and Myra stood on a hill outside the city, watching the dragons fly against the setting suns. Fira soared high, her red wings casting long shadows. Siri zipped through the sky like silver lightning. Goro glided smoothly, green scales shining in the light. Luna danced softly, her blue wings catching the colors of the dusk. Tomu breathed deeply. "They are more than machines. They are alive." Myra nodded. "And we will protect them, just like they protect us." Months passed, and the dragons grew stronger every day. The mysterious fleet that had attacked never returned, but the people and dragons were ready. The empire was safe. One morning, Emperor Vol called a great meeting in the palace hall. "We have faced danger and won," he said. "But the greatest strength is not in weapons or machines. It is in trust, friendship, and courage." He looked at Tomu and the dragons. "You have shown us the way." The crowd applauded loudly. Tomu felt proud but humble. That night, Tomu stood beside the dragons in the palace courtyard. He looked up at the stars shining above. The dragons hummed softly, their metal bodies warm and alive. Together, they were guardians not just of the empire, but of the future. Tomu smiled. "We will face whatever comes next. Together." And with that promise, the dragons spread their wings wide and took flight into the night sky. The empire of Rilun was safe, and its guardians were ready.